Hello, it's Raymond Aaron, the creator and the interviewer of the Wealth Creator Source series. This is a series of monthly interviews with world leaders in their field to bring you the wisdom that they have accumulated over their entire life in order to have you thrive in these somewhat troubled times. And I interview two types of people, as you know, the stealth millionaires that you'd never ever find and never know about, and I bring you their wisdom. But every so often and occasionally, I get to bring you a world famous expert, someone you know, someone you love, and someone you can't wait to hear about. And I'm overjoyed to say that that's who I'm bringing you this month. It's world famous Jack Canfield, the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series of books. He has written or edited over 200 books, has who knows how many bestsellers or number one bestsellers, and I'm here with him. Usually I do this by telephone or by Skype, but we're here on vacation together in Hawaii, and we're taking time out from the beach to be in this little room so that we can interview each other and educate you. So, Jack, hello.
Hey, glad to be with you, Raymond. Thanks for having me.
Now, you did something great. Actually, you've done many things great. I mean, Chicken Soup is a phenomenon. You've been known around the world because of it. You have enlivened people's lives just by opening up the book and reading 2 or 3 pages. And there's so many success stories you've had just from motivating people. But you decided to go further and created The Success Principles, an amazing book. And I remember 10 years ago being with you actually in Dr. John Gray's ranch. We were together, and your book came out. I looked at the principles, and I was so deeply moved because I know, and every successful person knows, what the principles are, but we never actually saw them written out. We never actually saw them all together, numbered, in order. It was dazzling. So I gave a brilliant testimonial. I was overjoyed and honored that one of my ideas was actually written up in the book, and my name is in your book. And you've had some spectacular successes in the 10 years from the book. So 10 years ago, I knew that the book said correct principles. But in the last 10 years, you've got powerful evidence that that book has been a spectacular success in so many people's lives. Tell us some of those success.
Well, one of my favorite stories is about this young man who was 15 years old who sent me an email. He said, "My mother never reads books, and she came home with your book." And so I was really freaked out about it. So I said, "Well, what must be something in there that she wants to know. I want to see what it is." So she went ahead and went to bed, and he stayed up all night reading the book. And he writes me this email. He said, I was getting F's in school. I was dropping out every day, ditching classes. I was smoking marijuana, drinking alcohol. And then what happened was I got your book, and I thought, wow, this is some really cool stuff. I'm going to start applying it to my life. He says, now I'm going to school. I'm not ditching classes. I'm getting A's. I'm not smoking marijuana. I'm not doing drugs, and I'm not drinking alcohol. And I thought, wow, a 15-year-old. I didn't write the book for 15-year-olds, but they're 15-year-olds, and I get all these letters from, one from Iran, from a 16-year-old who read the book in Farsi and then decided to learn English because if I ever came to Iran, he wanted to meet me. And I did go to Tehran this last year, and he comes to my seminar. And he wrote a letter to the promoter saying, I don't have any money, but I got to meet this guy. And he was so convincing, they gave him a scholarship. He came up and he hugged me on the break. It was so beautiful. He cried. He was shaking and told me he wanted to be a doctor and go to Harvard. And I said, well, I went to Harvard. I can hopefully help you get in there. But that's the kind of thing. Around the world, people are having these amazing experiences. I recently got a letter from someone in Chennai, India, and read the book and decided that they wanted to make more money. He didn't want his wife to have to work, and she was working. And so she said, I want to do something more important, and she wanted to start a salon. And he said, honey, you don't know anything about hair. You don't know anything about nails. She said, well, no, I want to own the salon, and we'll hire other people. So they did, and they had 3 or 4 really tough years. They had a loss for the first 3 or 4 years, but he kept going, and he kept going, and he kept going. There's a chapter in my book called Ask, 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 Ask. They approached 140 banks before they got a loan to expand from their first salon out. Now they have something like 350 salons. They're in all the major malls. They are. His goal is to have 1,000 salons by the next 2 years. They're now expanding to Dubai, where a lot of Indian expatriates live, and they want to go to all the places where the Indian expats are. And I've been in their salons. They're not only amazing, but they hire blind people who are the lower caste in India, and they actually have them provide the massages, foot massages, hand massages, and everything like that. So not only is he changing lives, hiring thousands of women and giving them jobs that would never happen before, but he's applying all these principles, and now he's running around India telling everyone, you got to read this book, you got to read this book. And so that kind of thing happens over and over and over.
What a great contribution. I know that Chicken Soup uplifted people, but then they need to read another book
Right.
as soon as they stub their toe to get uplifted again. But the Success Principles book does something different. It actually teaches them true principles, real principles of success, so that they can stub their toe all they want. They still have the wisdom in their mind and can still move forward.
Very, very true. And I think the problem is, when we went to school, most of us learned about economics, we learned about history, we learned about biology. But I always say, when's the last time you actually used most of that? Nobody gets divorced because they didn't memorize the 6 causes of the Civil War or the 7 exports of Argentina or whatever it might be. So we don't have social, emotional, psychological success training in our schools. It's really a crime. We should. And so what I wanted to do was provide a book that teaches you everything they should have taught you in school, but they never did. Communication skills, how to ask for and get what you want successfully, how to set goals, how to get rid of limiting beliefs, how to overcome fear, how to take action in the face of adversity, how to persevere in the face of failure. Most successes happen after a lot of failures. Brian Tracy recently gave a speech, and he had one line in it that I love. He said, we are try, fail, learn, 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 succeed machines. And so basically what happens, most of us give up too soon. You know the story, but with Chicken Soup for the Soul, that book was rejected by 144 publishers. It was the 145th publisher that said, yes, if I had given up after 100, I would not be sitting here talking to you now, because I wouldn't be worth listening to. No one would think I was successful. I wouldn't be famous. So the reality is that you have to never, ever give up. You can sometimes re-vector your goal if you learn something new and take it in a new direction. But most people give up too soon. I've seen kids go out to learn to play tennis, and after missing 7 balls, they throw their racket on the floor and quit. And I've seen a lot of adults do the same thing, So the reality is, life is a slow learning process. Now, with the internet and with other people's experience, which is what you share in these interviews and what you share in your workshops. And I always recommend go learn from other people's experience, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You want to be a millionaire, lots of people have done it and left a lot of clues in the form of books and manuals and CD programs and on TED Talks and so on and so forth. So be a lifelong learner and then apply that learning. Walt Disney said, it's impossible to set a goal if you don't have the capacity to achieve it. You won't even be able to think it up if you don't have the capacity to achieve it. Now, you may need to go get some training. You may need to team up with some other people that have skills and resources you don't have. You may need to learn how to raise money. Like today, the people that really win it big in tech industry, they raise a lot of money. First angel investors and then venture capital. And like I have a friend who started a new kind of anti-Facebook. It's totally, private, and they don't skim your data for, advertising and all that. And he's been at it for a year and a half now. And he's got about 150,000 people playing, but he's on this hockey stick curve. And I remember when he had a payroll of $1 million a month, and he was just scraping by. He was selling his house to get the mortgage money, and now he's got a payroll of $120,000 a month. He's got 30 programmers in about 10 countries around the world, and this thing's going to take off. And he'll eventually sell it probably for $1 billion if he ever decides to exit. But it's that willingness to persevere, to learn how to ask for what you need, whether it's get your wife to go to a movie with you, or whether it's to raise millions of dollars, and then to hang in there. There's a story I told in the first book, where there was a guy who couldn't get any money from venture capitalists. So he decided to get on the train that goes from Darien, Connecticut to New York every day, where all the Wall Street guys live. And he would just sit down next to somebody and he would say, hi, are you a qualified investor? Which means, do they have enough money to be able to afford to lose $50,000? And if they said yes, he would pitch his idea. He went back and forth on that train for 21 days, every morning, every afternoon, to New York, back from New York. And it was on the 21st day that someone had said, I'll invest. Now, how many people would be willing to sit on a train and get rejected, and stick with it? But that's what we did with Chicken Soup for the Soul. That's what he did. That's what Aristotle Onassis did. Aristotle Onassis, who was, married Jackie Kennedy, became Jackie. One time he was one of the richest guys in the world through shipping, but he was down in a South American country and realized that he had this opportunity to export and import tobacco. And so he knew it would work, but he didn't have the money, and he knew the guy who could do it. So he stood outside his office building every day. Again, it was 21 days. It must be some magical number, 21. But he stood outside his office building for 21 days, and every time the guy would come in, he had bodyguards, so he couldn't get up to him, but he would wave at him. So finally, after 21 days, the guy goes, "Who are you? Why are you always over here?" He said, "I'm trying to get a meeting with you." He says, "Well, here, go up the elevator." He only had from the first floor to about the 19th floor in this office building to pitch this guy, but he did it, and it was successful. And that's the story that led the guy. He read that, and then he got on the train and did the same thing.
Oh,
so,
God.
So it's like there are principles of perseverance. I think the universe it tests us. How committed are we to actually achieving those goals? And if we're willing to hang in there long enough, then it says, okay, I get it. You're committed. We're going to give you a little win here, and then you can play a bigger game and a bigger game and a bigger game.
Fascinating. I like that you've done all the work. First of all, you created the concept of putting all the success principles together. And second of all, you somehow figured out what all the success principles are, that if you sat me or Brian Tracy or Donald Trump down, we would come up with some of those.
Right.
Not because we're not as wealthy as you or not as smart as you, just because we wouldn't have thought of them all. So the question is, how did you actually get them all? There's lots of them, 64 of them, there's lots of them. And in the new book, there's even more.
Yeah, in the new book, we have a whole set of chapters on success in the digital age, because now with the internet, there's a lot of leveraging you can do. Like you can crowdsource a book, which really Chicken Soup was crowdsourced. A lot of different people would give us stories. You can crowdfund. There's a guy just made he crowdfunded $1 million on this thing called the Coolest Cooler. And he just put it up on YouFunded or Indiegogo, one of those things. And he said, if you give me X amount of money, I will send you, a cooler when it comes out. This is a cooler you take to the beach, has bigger wheels so you don't get caught in the sand. It's got the compartments inside are split. One side's for ice, one side's for stuff you don't want to get wet. It has a bottle opener. It has 2 speakers, so you can put your iPhone on it and have speakers there. It has a blender that sits on top, so you can make margaritas. I mean, it is the coolest cooler. I actually bought 3 of them. And if you gave him $1,000, he would actually come to your house and he would be the bartender for a party, right? So there's all these little reward levels. And he raised $1 million in a month. And he only wanted to raise $100,000 to create a prototype and start manufacturing. So we talk about that, how to brand yourself on the internet, how to have a YouTube channel, how to protect yourself on Facebook and so forth. So there's a lot of leveraging you can do now. There's a guy in the book I write about who was in medical school, and he wanted to leave medical school with no bills. And most people leave and they have hundreds of thousands of dollars. And also he didn't want his wife to have to work because she was pregnant. And so he went online and he found a product that he could sell. And it was a little cup that you would pee into, and it would tell you if you had drugs in your body. So parents could use it to drug test their kids. And he made over $1 million his first year. He's leaving medical school with more money than most people. And it's because he learned how to do internet marketing. So today we have leverage that never existed before. There was another guy I met. He went on eBay to sell his father's pool table. His father didn't want a pool table anymore. So he said, "Can you get rid of it for me?" He said, "Sure." He went on eBay. He made like $600 profit. And he said, "Whoa, that's really cool. Where can I get another pool table?" So he's going around all town finding people whose pool table had turned into where they fold the clothes because they weren't playing pool anymore. And when he ran out of those, he started importing them from China. And when I met him, he was doing $10 million a year. He's what's called the eBay Millionaire, and they have a conference every year where these guys come together. So there's a lot of leverage that it gives you today. So we talk about how to do that. But how I got the principles was I sat in bed one day with my son. He was sitting next to me, and we both had our computers. He was about, I think, 12. And I said, what's made me so successful? Because there I was making like $6 million a year. Everything was great. So I took up my laptop and I sat there and said, well, what are the principles? Well, surround yourself with positive people, set goals, visualize, affirm, take action, persevere, respond to feedback, don't give up. It's never too late to start. Went on and on and on. I had 114 principles. I thought, that's way too much for a book. I'm going to do 3 pages of principle. I said, that'd be too long. So what I did was I narrowed it down to about 80. And then my publisher said, no, it's still too long. So I narrowed it down to the top 64. Now there's 25 in the book that I call the basics. It's like blocking and tackling in football. You got to know those. You got to do them in the right order. A lot of times people are trying to open a lock, combination lock. You got the right numbers, but if they're in the wrong order, it still won't open. And so I decided, okay, now I got to look at what's the sequence of how you do this. And we put that in order. And I started teaching that in some seminars to get feedback to make sure they worked. And all my people were doubling their income, tripling their time off, making better relationships, losing weight, having better, intimate sex lives, everything that you could possibly think of, social impact, whatever. And so I said, okay, this stuff works. Then I said, I want to make sure it's not idiosyncratic to me and my crowd. So I started interviewing 75 of the most successful people in North America, including yourself, if you may remember. And I started using their stories as well as my own to illustrate the book. Now, what's exciting about the new book is I've taken a good number of those stories out and replaced them with stories of people who read the first book and actually had their life totally transformed as a result of it. So now the book is like everyday people doing extraordinary things. So some people can go, well, that's John Gray. He's different, because he wrote Men Are From Mars. John Gray's just like everyone else, But the fact is, if you talk about a guy who had a brain injury or a guy who was living on the street or whatever, and they were able to be successful, then everyone goes, well, I guess if they could do it, I can do it.
That's so powerful. The idea that you use celebrities initially, that's obvious because you wanted to add a lot of luster to your book. But the idea of taking the celebrities out, that's scary, and putting in everyday people, some of whom were in the gutter and got out of addiction, some of whom were average income and got to be high income, that's a brilliant idea. That's a scary idea. And it worked even better. What's your thought?
I think it works better because it was really interesting. I made one infomercial in my life. Everyone's going to do like, Tony Robbins, he made $52 million. I'm going to do that, right? So we made an infomercial called Think Big, Dream Big. And so what happens is we recorded it. It was great, and I got all these big famous people to do testimonials. Jack's this. I've used his principles. John Gray. I think you did it as well. Lots of successful people that were multimillionaires or were best-selling authors. They're well known, and it tanked, didn't do well, and we finally did a focus group, kind of like a little bit too late. But what they said was, well, they're all different. They're not like us. They're unusual. They're all like So, had we had normal people like a plumber and somebody working for the Postal Service and maybe a school teacher and a policeman and maybe an unemployed person do the testimonials, we would have been a lot better off. So I learned from that. If you say all Olympic athletes, and there's an Olympic athlete in my book now, a guy named Raj Bafsar of Indian descent, lives in America, and he was a guy who wanted to be in the Olympics in Greece, I think it was. And he was a national champion several years in a row in America. And then he goes to the competition to be in the Olympics. He does everything perfectly except one routine. And then when they announce all the names, he's an alternate. Now, the alternates go, but if no one gets injured, they just sit there and watch everyone else perform. He said it was the most painful thing of his life. Comes back, decides he's going to really go for it again. And he gets, once more, he's an alternate to the next time, to China. And he's just dying inside. And he got really depressed, and he went back, and the guy, his gym guy, said, you've got to, one of his fellow athletes gave him my book, said, you need to read this book, The Success Principles. And he went, he was just pissed off. He didn't want to do it. And then a week later, his coach gave him the same book. He said, oh, my God, this is a pattern. So he started reading it, and he started doing everything in the book, including affirmations. He put visualizations on a big vision board on his wall. I mean, it was his whole wall in his bedroom was his vision board. And what happened was he was an alternate in the gym, and then Paul Hamm, who had been an Olympic athlete and gold medalist before, got sick, and so he got to actually go. And another guy got injured on the team, And so everyone said Americans are not going to score. There's nobody who's had Olympic experience. He got everyone together, started teaching them the success principles in Beijing at night, and they went out and they won the bronze medal. So, I mean, I do have Olympic athletes, but he was just a regular guy. But see, if you have all that kind of person, then everyone goes, well, they're special, they're unique, there's something different, they have a different DNA, and that's not true. You know, the book now is ordinary people doing extraordinary things, because I want to inspire people to believe it's possible, but also give them the tools and the techniques as well as the principles. So every principle has activities and how to make that principle actualized in your life. And so it really is a handbook, a blueprint. It's a blueprint. If you follow the blueprint, you'll build the same house every time. But you got to follow the blueprint.
You know, I overheard you saying something, and I want to kind of throw you a hardball here and see if you can handle it.
Sure.
And that is, on one hand, I've heard you say, open up the book anywhere, and then miraculously, serendipitously, it'll be the success principle you need. And if you just read those few pages and inculcate that in your life, there'll be a gigantic improvement. But I've also heard you say the book is like a combination lock. You have to have every piece in place in order, and if you miss even one number, the lock doesn't open. So is one principle good enough, or do you have to have all 64? What's the deal?
I think there's a core 25 you really need to do in the right order. And the rest of it after that, you can pretty much, they're just ancillary things like having a mastermind group or, lean into it. It's another principle we have. Surround yourself with positive people. There's a whole thing on the total truth process, how to get rid of negative emotions. So those are not critical to success, but there are some that are. So the first 25 really need to be done in order. And so what I tell people is read the whole book through once, just read it through once, then go back and read chapter by chapter for a year, one chapter a week. So at the end of the year, you'll have gone through 52, which will cover all the core stuff. Then after that, you can use it more like the Chinese use the I Ching. You wake up in the morning, just open the book, and that may be the thing you're going to focus on that day. You want to bring that into consciousness. Well, I'm going to visualize today, or I'm going to, be more grateful today. There's a whole chapter on gratitude. There's a chapter on pass it on, pay it forward. So those kind of things are valuable, but they're not critical to the main formula, if you will.
Okay, good answer. And now I've got a really tough question for you. You're going to need to be vulnerable and honest with this one, Jack. You're going to have to let go of the image of the big Jack Canfield to answer this question. And that is, which one of the 64, there's actually more now, which one of the success principles is the toughest one for you?
I would say the toughest one for me is probably... I teach meditation. I think it's really important. And I have a chapter in the book called Inquire Within, because most of us are always looking outside. In fact, I start with a story about a guy under a street lamp looking for his key. And a guy comes along and says, what are you looking for? He says, I lost my key. So I'll help you look for it. So he gets down, they're looking. They look for an hour. There's no key. He says, are you sure you lost it out here? He says, oh, no, I lost it in my house, but there's more light out here. So basically, most people are looking outside themselves for the answers. When you look inside, it's much easier. Now, I do meditate, but I don't do it every day, and I teach people they should. But I get up in the morning sometimes, and I just want to jump into my work, or if I'm traveling. So I have a lot of excuses. But every time I meditate, I get some really valuable piece of information. I teach this principle I learned from a Canadian called the Hour of Power. And I think his name was Azim Azul. And he says 20 minutes of meditation, plus visualizing your goal at the end, 20 minutes of reading, self-help, uplifting, inspirational, or professional material, and 20 minutes of hard exercise. If you do that, you're going to be happy, healthier, and wealthier at the end of the year. And so that is the hardest thing for me, because I'm a night person. That's when I write. That's when I have my best thoughts. My wife's a morning person. By the time I get up, she's already eating breakfast, and come on, let's go. And so I really have to force myself and find ways. I write on the mirror, meditate, and lipstick and stuff to remind myself to do it. So that's probably the hardest one. The other one for me is some people would accuse me of being a workaholic, because I love my work. And so balance, taking time off and taking free days. You and I have studied with Dan Sullivan, who teaches free, focus, and buffer days. And a free day is midnight to midnight with no work-related activity. And I would say that that probably is a bigger challenge than even the meditation, is forcing myself to actually go from morning to bed without checking an email, reading a journal article, or something like that.
Well, I think on that topic that you and I and some of the, in fact, every one of the people that we vacation with, like here in Hawaii, we just love what we do so much that we can't differentiate between when it's working and when it's not working. Like sometimes I'll give a weekend workshop and I'll have a guest speaker, and when I'm off stage, I'm white knuckling it. I'm saying, get me back on stage. Like I can't stand it. I hope he goes shorter. I hope he gets off soon. And I'm saying, Raymond, relax. He's doing a great job. The audience loves him. And they'll get lots of time with you. Just get over yourself. And so if somebody says, how many hours a week do you work? I truly have no idea, not even the tiniest. Sometimes I'm on an airplane and I'm watching a movie and I get an idea and I flip open my computer and write really quickly all my thoughts so that I can use it in my next book or I can teach it next. And am I working then? It's actually more fun than watching the movie. And so I have no idea when I'm working. So I give you a little bit of a pass on that one,
Okay.
because it's
I'll take it. No, it's true. I'll get on a plane, and at the end, the airline attendant will come over and say, "Do you ever rest? You were working the entire way." I said, "No, I was having fun. I'm outlining a book, or I'm making slides for a presentation, which I love. That's my art form, is making PowerPoint and keynote slides." So I think what you said is, I think with Thomas Alva Edison, who invented the light bulb, said, when your vocation feels like a vacation, you've made it. And so for me, I love to teach. You and I teach something called Core Genius, or your unique abilities, and the idea that we all have that. And so my unique abilities are speaking and presenting, coaching, running experiential workshops, writing and developing products. And that's what I do. When I'm doing that, I'm making money. I'm having a great time. I was just in Tehran teaching, and I was so frustrated, like you, because I had they have all these sponsors. They have to have sponsors. They can't make it just on the registration fees. So they have all these companies that sponsor, and each one of them has to get up after the break and talk about their company in order to justify their sponsoring. And some of these guys go on and on. I'm going like, get off the stage. I want to get out there and teach, And they only give me 6 hours. I would do it for 9, Come on, have them come at 8 and not leave till 6. No, they will never do that, And then at the end of the day, everyone's going, no, more time. We don't want to leave yet, Neither do I. I'm having so much fun. So I think, we talk about internal guidance system, that your internal guidance system, like a GPS in a car, what that is joy. When you're experiencing joy, that's your GPS saying you're on course. You're doing what you're here to do. You're fulfilling your purpose. People ask about purpose a lot. And a friend of mine recently, he defined success in a new way. He wrote a book actually called Success 3.0. And he defined success as fulfilling the evolution of consciousness that's trying to express itself through you as you. Now, that's a totally new definition. I used to say it was fulfilling your soul's purpose. He says, no. Consciousness is evolving, and the cutting edge of consciousness is human individuals. And each of us, when we do the thing that we're drawn to do, we're expanding that into the world and evolving it. Like your work has evolved, my work has evolved, the artists, their work evolves over time, musicians evolve over time, architecture evolves over time, everything is evolving. And so when we allow ourselves to grow and change, to let go of that which was and become the new thing that wants to express itself through us, then we are the cutting edge of the evolution of God consciousness. Now that's a pretty cool thing.
That is.
And when you don't do that, you're not only not fulfilling your own destiny, you're stopping the evolution of all consciousness. So everything that's needed in the world will be given and provided by those people who want to do it. We need airline mechanics. Everyone can't be a motivational speaker, right, or an entrepreneur. If we didn't have any airline mechanics or people that love to work on cars or people that love to solve computer problems, we'd all be in deep trouble, So there are people who love to do that. There are people who love to cook. So follow your bliss. Do the thing that makes you come alive. Someone said recently, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, because what the world needs are people who've come alive, because then you'll
Ooh,
yeah, because then we'll be fulfilling every need the world has.
I met a man many years ago, and he worked for a railway. And traditionally, people who start working for the railway, they work there all their life, and they have very long-term employees. But this particular guy started working at 16, had no education, so he kept getting passed by for promotions. And then when they promoted some kid past him, some younger person who had a university degree, he would train them and then be resentful that he trained them, but he didn't get promoted. When I was talking to him, I said to him, "Do you love your job?" He said, "No, I hate it. People get promoted. They don't respect me. They don't." I said, "Well, so why don't you quit?" And he said something which has burned into my heart, and it bothers me. It's been bothering me all my life since he said it. He said, "I've only got 17 years to go to retirement." And I said to myself, I was just a young man then. I said, how many 17-year periods are you going to give up in your life? You don't get that many 17-year periods in your life. And to just give one up, if he had read your book, Success Principles, he would never have just given up another 17 years.
Right.
Just give us an example of one or two principles that if he had just captured those, it would have changed his life, and he wouldn't have waited to retirement to start doing what he loved.
Well, I think I'm not going to get this right because I just heard it recently and I have memorized it. But Warren Buffett said something like, saving up all the things you want to do until you retire is like saving up all of the sex you're going to have until you retire. It makes no sense,
No.
So I have a section in the book that talks about that you're never too old. And so there's a woman in there. She was 55 years old. She was a nurse. She was totally overweight, out of shape, and a smoker. And her husband came to her and said, I was going to run a 10K race. It's about 6 miles. And would you want to do it with me? And she said, are you kidding me? We're not in shape today. He said, well, let's just run around the backyard. Now, their backyard was big, like the size of a ballroom. And so they ran around the backyard, and they both fell on their knees, wheezing, thought they were going to die. She was so embarrassed by how out of shape she was. She said, this sucks. I'm going to get in shape. She stopped smoking. And every day, her and her husband would run around the backyard. They'd add another lap. So the second day, 2 laps, third day, 3 laps, 4 days. And eventually, the backyard got too small. Then it was going, how far can we go? And every day, we'll add another telephone pole before we turn around. She ran a 6K race. And then she went on or 10K race. And then she went on to run a marathon. Then she ran a 50-mile race.
Wow.
And now, I met her when she was 81. We were both getting an award for being outstanding Californians. Me because of Chicken Soup, her because of this ridiculous racing career. But she is what they call an elite long-distance runner. I mean, she runs 75-mile races. She ran across the Sahara Desert. Oh. She ran a 375-mile eco challenge where they kayaked, they had to rappel down mountains, they had to run, they had to bike, they had to swim. She's been in the Ironman triathlon. She's the oldest woman ever to complete the Ironman triathlon. She holds the 83-year-old record for the marathon for 4 hours and like 10 minutes or something, which
really?
most young people can't even do that. She's amazing. And so she started when she was 55. So it's like, don't wait to do what you want to do. Start now. We've all heard this term bucket list. I call it your 101 goals list. And, whether you start it when you're 15 or whether you start it when you're 70, this woman said, well, I can't make a list of 101 things I want to do. I'm 70. I said, look, I have a guy I met. I think his name was Ed Jones. He was up in Portland, Oregon. And when he was 95, he was buying bonds that didn't mature for 10 years. So you got to be, you got to be optimistic about how long you're going to live. And I think one of the reasons people die early is because they don't have anything to look forward to.
Yes.
And so if you have a list of things you want to do, George Burns was booked into.
I'm just going to give that example.
Yeah, well, go ahead and give it.
No, you do it.
Well, he was booked into the Palladium in London when he was 100 years old. He was going to celebrate his 100th birthday there. And he said, I never renege on a contract, So it's like you have to have some goals in life and things you want to do. And so make a list.
He signed that contract when he was 90, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
And got paid.
Exactly.
In advance.
Yeah, exactly. So really, it's like, all the things you've often thought about. On my list, I made a list of 115 things. I wanted to climb to the top of the Eiffel Tower. I wanted to see the Great Pyramids. I wanted to walk on the Great Wall of China. I wanted to go to Machu Picchu. I wanted to go to the rainforest. I wanted to meet the President of the United States. I actually had lunch at the White House a few years ago. All these things, and if you write them down and then you read the list, say once a month, and just kind of think about each of those things, you start to attract all the things you need into your life. One of my friends did it, and he wanted to go on a submarine. He wanted to go on an aircraft carrier, land a plane, aircraft. And he was a football coach. And he posted his list in the locker room of his football team in college. And then when these kids graduated, one of them became an ensign in the Navy. And he said, hey, coach, you want to go on a submarine? I'm in a submarine. If you can make it out to San Diego in the state. And he went. He met the Pope. He met the president. He got to, ride in a tank. I mean, all these different things he wanted to do because he published it. Mark Victor Hansen and I, a good friend of yours, Mark as well, we wrote a book called Dare to Win. And we wrote our 101 list in there. And one of the things I wrote was I wanted to meet Kenny Rogers. I like the singer Kenny Rogers. And so I get a letter with letterhead that says Kenny Rogers on it. About 2 months later, he says, someone told me I was in your book. I bought your book. I read your book. I've always wanted to meet you. I said, get out of here. So I called him up and I said, why? And he said, well, I've always wanted to be an author. You always wanted to be a singer. I always wanted to be an author. You're the best-selling author. I want to write a book. So he said, next time you're in Vegas, come visit. So we get to Vegas, Mark and I, and we get to go backstage with the Righteous Brothers, like Kenny Loggins, Kenny Rogers, all these people. And I was like, okay. So when you put the list out there, other people see it. One of my goals was to go to the Country Music Awards. Person says, I read it in your book. I happen to produce the Country Music Awards. I'd love to have you come, be my guest. So right now, 87 of my 115 have come true. I've actually added another 30. I've got 145 or something like that now. But it's like if you do that every year, 2 or 3 things just kind of pop into your lap.
And you actually don't want to achieve every one of them because then there's nothing left. Then you die.
Well, you can always add to the list, right?
Yes.
You're an adventurer. I mean, I have a slide of you in my slideshow with the penguins down in Antarctica. You're wearing a yellow cummerbund, a yellow tie like the emperor penguins. I have a picture of you with snow in your beard or ice from all the condensation of your breathing when you went to your polar race. And you just gave me a picture of you with a harp seal, I think, something like that. And so you keep doing these adventures, I mean, I don't know how old you are now. You're probably close to 70 or something.
I just turned 70.
Just turned 70. And you're still going off on adventures,
Yes.
and me too. I still have a lot of things I want to do. I haven't learned to scuba dive yet. I want to do that soon. And so hot air balloons, another one I've got on my list. And so, life can be an adventure, but only if you design. I say life by design, not by default. You have to design the life you want. And then you can actually put action toward it, or you can just visualize it and affirm it and put your list on, Facebook or something like that so that people can see it, because people want to help other people do what they want to do.
They do.
And if they have connections, or people come up and say, hey, my brother owns this camp. One of my things I want to go on a safari again. And so, my brother owns a camp in South Africa. I can get you a deal. I like deals. Let's do it, So it's, my life has been magical. So has yours.
Yes.
And it's because we live these principles. And as you said, they're all in a book called The Success Principles. It's, success is not a secret anymore. Tony Robbins once said, success leaves clues. And it leaves it in the form of books, manuals, seminars, workshops, YouTube videos, TED Talks, whatever it is. So take advantage of those things. There's nothing out there that you can't do. Recent research shows, someone wrote a book called Talent is Overrated. It's not talent. We can learn to do people that sing off key can learn to sing on key. People that can't dance can learn to dance. People with no rhythm can learn to have rhythm. We now know how to teach everything. It's out there. Go find it.
Well, and you don't have to look far to find it, because the highly revised, wildly updated, even spectacular in the original edition, Success Principles is now out. Jack Canfield has poured his life and soul into creating them and then enhanced it from the original. And go to Amazon to get it. It's an amazing book. Jack is the man. He truly has put the truth into this book. We all teach from the same well of wisdom, but some people, and my friend Jack Canfield is one of the very few, that has dug the deepest in that well and sucked all the goodies out and presents it so clearly and so effortlessly for you. Read the book. Choose a principle you love and implement it. Choose the first 25 principles and implement them. Choose all of them and implement them, because they absolutely work. Jack, I love you, and I'm honored that you spent this time from your vacation and my vacation to do this. And I look forward to our having a wonderful relationship for many years to come. I look forward to many of my listeners and subscribers and their friends buying your book and having an enhanced life. And I end this interview like I end all of them to my subscriber. Thank you for your dedication to your ongoing self-education.
Well, I'm honored to have been interviewed by you once again, Raymond. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what I know with the world and with all of the people that are following you.
Thank you.